Hey seniors, my name's Kyle Aldis. I'm the communication director here at SAS. I also have two little eagles, a preschooler and a first grader, and I am an alum from the class of 2002. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you. I've watched this past semester how you've handled all of the different challenges and the adversity that's been put in front of you, and your adaptability and your positivity has really been a great example to me and I know to the rest of the community. So I want to take a minute to recognize that and to just express my gratitude to you for that. So thank you. Today I was supposed to talk to you a little bit about transitions, and in the pre-pandemic world we were going to be all together. But since things have changed a little bit, I'm going to try something a little bit different. So we will see how it goes. Thanks, guys. A couple weeks ago, I connected with some of you and asked you to do one thing. I asked you to describe your senior year in one word. And here's what you said.
Unpredictable.
Roller coaster.
Turbulent.
Unexpected.
Unpredictable.
Unexpected.
Unforgettable.
Bittersweet.
Interesting.
Fulfilling.
Unpredictable.
This year will forever be marked by this pandemic. But as I listened to some of your voices and the comments that you sent over, I was reminded of this quote by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. And he said, "To bear in mind constantly that all of this has happened before and will happen again. The same plot from the beginning to end, the identical staging." Look, let me show you what's happened since I was a senior here at SAS all the way until now. In September 2001, 9/11 happened. Then we had SARS. Then I was living in England during the London bombings. Then in 2004, there was a massive tsunami. Then we had the Iraq War. Then there was Hurricane Katrina. And in 2008, I graduated from college during the peak of the financial crisis. Since we know that these things have happened before, and we know that they're going to happen again, it's important for us to figure out how we're going to handle things when life gets a little... No! 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 To do this, let's first consult an ancient Taoist parable about a man and his horse. There was this old man who had a beautiful horse, and the horse was actually the livelihood of the family. It's how they earn their keep each day. One day the horse runs away, and the man's neighbors' friends come over and they say, "Oh, terrible luck. How unfortunate. How terrible this is that this has happened to you, and I can't believe it." And the old man looks at them and says, we'll see. We'll see. A few days later, the horse actually returns. And the horse comes back with a pack of horses. So now the man went from having one horse to no horse to having a whole pack of horses. Same neighbors come back over and say, "Wow, how fortunate you are. How lucky. I can't believe it. I wish that I was you, because now look at how much money you'll be able to make." And the man looks at him again and says, "You know what? We'll see. We'll see." Just a few days after that, the man's son is trying to break in one of the horses, and he is thrown violently from one of the horses, breaks both his legs on impact. Same neighbors come back over again and say, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. I can't believe that you've suffered such terrible luck and misfortune." And the old man looks at him again and says, "You know what? We'll see. We'll see how this goes." Shortly after that, the country ends up going to war. And all of the able-bodied men are called into the military service. The young man can't go because he's unfit for duty. Both his legs are broken. Same neighbors come back over and say, "Wow, how fortunate you are that your son won't have to go to war because of the accident that happened." And the man looks at him again and says, "You know what? We'll see." I love this story for two reasons. First, how many of you have neighbors, friends, voices in your life who try and tell you how you should feel about something? This happened to you, so you should be feeling really bad. Or this happened to you, so you should be feeling really good. The man in this story never lets the voices dictate his story. And secondly, the man recognizes that the end of the story has not actually arrived. And for us, because we woke up this morning, the same is true. Our story is not over yet. There's more story to be told. Storytelling is a major part of my job, and I love thinking about things in terms of stories. Look, and whether you consider yourself a storyteller or not, you are. You tell yourself stories every single day, whether they're stories that others have told you and that you've adopted, or stories that you've crafted yourself. Every single day you are telling and deepening the belief in certain stories. Before coming to SAS, I went to a public school just outside Houston, Texas. And during my sophomore year, I had a math teacher named Mr. Garza. And Mr. Garza loved to deliver tests back publicly, so everyone in the class would know what you got. And there was one time where I was one of the last people to get the test back. And when I got it back, I got a score very, very low into the failing area, as in below 50. And he handed it back and he made a comment. And he said something along the lines of, with a score like this, all you'll ever do is work in McDonald's someday. Just like Ronald McDonald, you're just going to be a clown. And look, it was one test and it was one class, one comment from one teacher. But the story changed that day for me. The story became, I'm not good at math. And that story has stuck with me ever since. I can point to and look at decisions I've made in my life based on that story that I internalized and told myself that day, based on that one comment from someone else. That's the power that stories have. Whether they're stories that others tell us or stories that we craft ourselves, stories can start to determine what our lives look like. You have experiences every single day that impact the story that you're crafting. For example, right now, all of us are facing the global pandemic. We're all in the mix. And yet there are wildly different stories being told right now. Some people are talking about how this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's going to destroy economies. It's going to destroy certain countries. And there are others who are saying this is one of the greatest opportunities that we have if we're able to take advantage of it. And there are opportunities for us to serve. And there's ways that I can give back. And there's people that I can help. And that's the story that they're telling. It's up to you to decide what story you're going to tell. There's this great story about Thomas Edison and his factory, his laboratory. On a cold December night in the early 1900s, there's a massive explosion at his lab. The place is going up in a massive fire. The fire is so big that they call in fire departments from different counties and they're all trying to put it out and they can't. Thomas Edison is standing there watching this fire happen, watching his life's work burn down. And his son comes up next to him and says, "What are we going to do?" And Thomas Edison turns to him and says, "Hurry and grab your mom and her friends and tell them that they will never see another fire like this in their lives." The clarity from him in that moment to be able to think, the story that I'm going to tell is this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So grab your friends and let's all enjoy this fire. His son protested a little bit, and then Edison looks at him and goes, "You know what? We just burned a lot of rubbish. We just got rid of a lot of rubbish." Again, for him to be able to frame the story in a way that keeps him in control of what's happening. The New York Times interviewed him later that night, and to put it into perspective, in that single night, he lost about $23 million worth of equipment and findings and research and inventions. And he tells the reporter, "You know what? We're going to come back tomorrow, and we're going to slowly start building again." In several years' time, Edison was able to completely rebuild everything that he had lost. He didn't have to lay off a single employee, and several years later, they reported $10 million in revenue. Edison controlled the story, and you and I have that same opportunity. It's up to us to decide what story we're going to tell despite what the circumstances are around us. Don't let others write your story for you. Don't let outside events dictate what the next chapter is. And most of all, don't forget that the story's not over. You woke up this morning, and because you woke up this morning, there is more story for you to keep writing. So the real question is, how do we learn how to do this? And we're going to talk about a couple things. So first, we're going to talk about stillness. Then we're going to talk about starting with the end in mind. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about what are those first incremental steps we can take to really begin crafting that story and believing the stories that we're trying to tell ourselves. Okay, so first, let's start with stillness. The well-known author Stephen King said, "Write with the doors closed and rewrite with the doors open." And what he means is when it's time to craft that narrative and to think things through, remove the distractions. There was a study that was done back in 2011 that said that the average person is bombarded by about 100,000 words a day. That's the equivalent of trying to read Hamlet, Of Mice and Men, and Animal Farm all in the same day, and then trying to process all of that and focus and figure out and filter. You know, when you have that many things coming at you all at once, how can you focus? How can you craft a narrative and a story when your mind sounds like this? I have no doubt that many of you are very capable of managing wildly busy schedules. I see some of your schedules. You move from thing to thing and event to event. You've got social lives, you've got academic lives, you have activities, athletics, you have drama, you have art. You do all of these things and you're incredibly good at moving. But how many of you have developed the skill of being still, of stopping, of pausing? Because it's in those moments that you're able to really sit back and take note of what's happening around you, filter out the distractions, and figure out what's most important. To craft the story and to figure out how you want to write your story, you have to step back. You have to take time. You have to find stillness. And I love this word stillness because it's not just about finding a quiet place. It starts with maybe finding a space that's quiet, but really it's about finding mental stillness, that mental quiet, that peace of mind. Because as you remove the clutter and you remove the distractions, you're able to focus more deeply, and it allows you to really be able to process and figure out what you're looking for. And that's when you start to really craft that narrative and think about who you want to become and the story that you want to write. There's this great quote from the French mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal, who said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Look, he said that back in the 1600s. However true it was back then, it's exponentially more true now. How crucial it is for us to be able to learn how to find stillness in our lives. And I believe that that will be one of the differentiators that if you establish and you cultivate in your life, that will help you stand apart from your peers around the world. Because everybody's able to move forward. Everybody's moving at a rapid speed. And very few people have learned how to hit the brakes, to stop for a minute, to pause and to think, okay, stop the video now. If you're in your advisories, hit pause, take 60 seconds. And what I want you to do is I want you to just sit quietly for the next 60 seconds and just see where your mind goes. Okay, go. Okay, so we talked a little bit about stillness and the importance of removing distraction. Let's talk about beginning with the end in mind. The author J.K. Rowling says that when she created Harry Potter, she always knew where Harry was going to end up and what that was going to look like and what his ending would be. And the same is true for us. It's important for us to figure out, well, where are we trying to go? What is it that we're ultimately shooting for? And so my question for you would be, have you thought about the end? Like the end. Okay, it sounds a little bit morbid, but actually I want you to take just a second and think through, okay, well, who's there? When we talk about the end, that's like the end. Who's at the funeral? What are they saying? What are they feeling? What are they saying about me? That's the kind of end that you need to spend a little bit of time thinking through. David Brooks, the author, describes it like this. He says that in life, we've got two different things we're working on. We work on resume virtues and we work on eulogy virtues. And the resume virtues are those things that we're really good about thinking about. We know that we want to get better at the Adobe Creative Suite so we can add it to our resume. We know that we want to run a marketing campaign that has $1 million budget, so we set out to do it and we add it to our resume. But the eulogy virtues, those are the things that people will look back and they'll say about us at our funeral. And those are the things that we don't spend as much time crafting. And it's important for us to spend time thinking about that because that's ultimately the type of life that we're trying to shape. That's the story that we're trying to tell. It's important for us to think about who we're trying to become because now, in this moment, as we face this global pandemic, you can say, okay, the person I want to be is someone who is thought of as compassionate. And that means that in a moment like this, when all of this is happening around the world, what do I do that demonstrates compassion? Once you understand who you're trying to become, It allows you and informs the decisions that you make now, because now you know, okay, I want to be that type of person, so now I'm going to act in this particular way because that's how that type of person would act and behave. It is informative to you and allows you to handle situations as they come. So it's crucial for us to be able to look ahead and figure out what is the end for us. So I want you to take a minute. We're going to stop the video again. You're going to pause. You're going to spend another 60 seconds. And I want you to think about your funeral. Think about who's there. Friends, family, colleagues. And then think about, what are they saying about you? Are they commenting on how amazing you were at Adobe InDesign? Are they talking about how great you were at remembering equations? Are they talking about how kind you were, how you remembered their name, how you said hi to them in the hallway? It could be any number of different things. What do you want them to say about you? Okay, go. Okay, so we talked about stillness. We've talked about beginning with the end in mind. The last thing we need to do is just get started. So you have to take that first step. Now you have to prove to yourself, one small victory at a time, that you are becoming that person that you want to become. So think about this. The British cycling team, the national cycling team, from 1908 to 2003 had only won one gold medal. Actually, that's the only thing they'd ever won during that period of time. In fact, they were so bad that one of the European bike manufacturers said, "We won't sell you our bikes because you're so bad. We don't want people to see you riding our gear because that'll be bad for our brand image." So they were that bad. In 2003, the team hired a performance management specialist, David Brailsford. And so he came in and he said, look, we are going to be obsessed with incremental growth. We're going to just obsess over the 1%. We need to just get that tiny bit better. And so he broke down everything that goes into cycling and riding into its most basic components. And he said, we are just going to get 1% better. So they did everything. They looked at the seat. How can we make the seat 1% better? Handlebars. How do we make the handlebars 1% better? How do we change the way that the clothes that we're wearing, the way that we sit, our posture? How do we change the way we lift weights? How do we change our nutrition? All of these things, how can we get 1% better? Everything was focused on that incremental advantage. And it started with the basic stuff, but then turned into things like, how can we change the mattress that everybody sleeps on so that they get a little bit better sleep? The pillow that they sleep on. How do we change? They even ended up changing the truck. So the truck that transported all of the bikes, they ended up painting it stark white so that they could see any little bit of dust or dirt that got inside that could potentially hinder the bike, the performance of the machines themselves. He was obsessive about the 1%. And then it took a few years, and then in 2007, everything kind of came together, because between 2007 and 2017, they just went on a winning spree. During that 10-year period, they won 178 world championships, 66 gold medals in the Olympics, and they had 5 Tour de France winners that were British. Okay, that's an incredible feat for a group that had won one thing in the past 100 years. All of that comes from focusing on getting that small win. And so when you think about where you're trying to become, who you're trying to become, and where you're trying to go, you might think, I'm trying to end up over here, but right now I'm stuck over here. You don't worry about this right now. Right now you're going to worry about, how can I take one incremental tiny step forward? And so I want you to think for a second about, what is it? What's that very first step that you can take? Because once you make that first step, you've begun to prove to yourself that yes, that story is true. The story about me being someone who is kind, that's a true story, because I just texted my friend. That story about you being someone who is giving, that's true, because you just gave some money to somebody who was out on the streets begging. You need those little wins to help secure the story, because they remind you and they solidify in your mind that yes, this is a true story. So you're going to stop the video one more time, and you're going to discuss with your advisory. I need you to sit there and think about, what is the first step that you can take right now to put yourself just 1% closer to who you're trying to become. Okay, go. Okay, so we know that this year has been a little bit, but that's okay, because we know that we're in control of our stories. We aren't gonna let the media tell us, our friends tell us, or anybody else tell us what our story is and how we should be feeling about it. You are the author of your story. And because you woke up this morning, there's more story to be written. Okay, thanks you guys. Congratulations. You guys have weathered an incredibly wild senior year. I hope and wish all the best for you. Congratulations.